So when we look at rational numbers, make sure that you have a good sense of where rational numbers are on the number line. Make sure you have some good standards, come benchmark fractions. So for example, 1/2, really it's a really good benchmark because we know it's exactly halfway between 0 and 1. 1/4 is going to be halfway between those. Okay. Now when we talk about 0.1, when we want to benchmark it, we know that it's got to be less than 1/4 because 1/4 as a decimal is 0.25. 0.1 is 1/10, so we can kind of divide up this on the number line and say that's approximately probably about there. So 0.1. When we talk about negative 1.1, make sure that you're going in the right direction. It's negative, and then we're going to go 1 and then 0.1 past the negative 1. And make sure you're in the right direction as well because we're becoming more negative. We talk about negative 7/8. Okay, we can kind of divide this up into eighths. You should have a sense of the fraction value as well. It's about it's 0.875, close to 0.9. So we're going to maybe put it right about here. Okay, so negative 7/8. Now, if you want to be more accurate, you can do half. Actually, we should do that. Half and half. Okay, so that's going to be where the negative 7/8 is going to be. Negative 4/5 is going to be just to this side of that. So it's going to be somewhere between 6/8 and 7/8. Okay, so it's going to be somewhere about here. So negative 4/5. Negative 0.33, we got to think of what is equivalent to negative 1/3. Okay, so negative 1/3, probably somewhere around there. Okay, so negative 0.33. And then 7/9. 7, the denominator 7 is really an awkward fraction. Okay, so it's if you can understand that as a benchmark, that would be good because it's about 0.14. Okay, so we know this is going to be 1 2/7, so it should be about 1.28. So 1 1/4, just past a quarter. So somewhere around here is going to be 9/7. Okay, so when we're adding, subtracting when we're adding, subtracting, timesing, dividing by fractions, we need to make sure that we are understanding the factor pieces involved that make up these fractions, because the factor pieces are needed to come up with a common denominator. So here, the common denominator is when we match the factors in the denominator. So here we're missing a factor of 8. We need to balance that with 8 on the top. Here we're missing a factor of 5. We need to balance that with a factor of 5 on the top. By doing so, we now have a common denominator of 40. And we can add these two fractions together because now that the common denominator, we have the same size fraction pieces. So we can count them together. And instead of 16/40, 15/40, so we're counting the same thing. So we have 31. And we don't change the size of the fraction, we end up with 40ths here. So here, to get a common denominator, we need to look at the factors. Okay, so this is going to have 3 and 5. This is going to have factors of 5 and 5. Okay, so then when we look at what are the missing factors, well, we're missing a factor of 5 here. So we need to times 5 times 5. Here we're missing a factor of 3, so we times 3 times 3. So the lowest common denominator between those two numbers is going to be 75. So now we get 5/75, which is the same as 1/15. Here we get 21/75, which is the same as 7/25. Now we're talking about the same size fractions, so we can add those together, and the size of the fraction doesn't change. Here we're doing BEDMAS. We have to do the inside the brackets first. Okay, so when we're doing BEDMAS, make sure that you're keeping track of all the parts that we're not using. So this 1/3 needs to be kept track of, the 2/5, the operation plus in between. So 2 plus 2/3 is going to be 6/3 plus 2/3 is going to give me 8/3. Times before plus, so again we need to keep track of that 2/5. So we end up with 8/9. To add these fractions together, we need a common denominator. They don't share any factors. So we're going to use a times 9 times 9 times 5 times 5. I get a common denominator of 45. Okay, so adding those numerators together, we get 58. And the size of the fraction doesn't change. So we have 58/45, and they don't share any common factors. Here we have brackets and divide, so we want to add the brackets together. So our common denominators are going to be 20, so we're going to use a times 5 times 5 times 2 times 2. So I'm going to 5 plus 14 all over 20. The divide, I can do opposite, opposite. So I'm going to put the divide on the bottom. Divide by 3 goes on the bottom. Divide by 4 means we're really timesing by 4. So adding that together, when I'm multiplying fractions, really it's just one big fraction of times on top, divide on bottom. So I can cancel any common factors here. So I have a common factor of 4. So I'm going to make that 1 and 5. So times 4, divide 4, cancel out. And I end up with 19/15 as my final answer.